So let's just start with the presentation, what we are going to do and what's inside that. So first of all, the topic of today's topic presentation is what are we missing in web application still. So as my experience drive me from the web application penetration tester to the red teamer, so I have combined many methodologies and approaches to one thing to execute and penetrate the web applications and the mobile applications. So what we are going to talk about, we are talking about the some logic flaws in the web applications. Before that, I would like to give my brief introduction to all of you. My name is Mirza Burhan Baig, and I've been working with ZeroDayLab for quite a time. And before that, I was working with the banking industry and the health industry most of the time. So my credentials include OSCP and some other certifications which are renowned in the world. And I would mention that I was a bug bounty hunter in the early days, 2012, 2013. So that got me in my name in the Facebook, Microsoft, and all the other big notch companies. So we do the bug bounty hunting before the red teaming and all the other things. So after that, I moved to the web application penetration testing side, and then mobile and red teaming. Now we are working with the web applications and threat hunting kind of things as well. So I've worked for financial industries, health, business sectors, and all the other sectors that are in the industry. And I've been working on the vendor side most of my time, so I'm not that much more of a client side work. So I managed to work with the clients, different time, every month, every quarter. So this is a brief introduction about me. I've spoken on international conferences we work for the Riyadh and CactusCon and the OWASP. I've been speaking for them with alongside the B sides as well. So if you want to hit me up on the Twitter, just scan the QR code. Thank you very much. Let's move towards the topic. What are we talking about? And there's a very famous quote in the market. There are only two type of companies. We know that those who have been hacked and those who will be. So I'm not sure, and we are not sure that if our environment is secure enough that we are not hacked, or we are hacked and we are working on that. So we have to secure it from the perspective from the client end and the server end as well, right? And I'm talking about the in the perspective of web application. So we have to secure it from the front end as well, and we have to secure it from the back end as well. But today's topic, which I'm talking about, it's totally engage the logic of your application. I'll give you a brief about that. So just a quick fact: Lazarus Group, $81 million scam. The APT Lazarus tried to get hands on the billions of dollars from the Bangladesh bank, but it was a stop in between because it was a compromise assessment and all the other things that they combined. But there are some flaws in the web applications, in the network, and many things are involved. So a little bit about the Lazarus thing. First of all, I would like to talk about the OWASP top 10 changes that held in the 2021 till 2027. We are talking about the web application flaws in the OWASP top 10, from injections to the A1, and then we have a broken authentication, and we have a lot of things to talk about. But in 2021, we have seen that the listing has been changed, and the performance and all the other things has been changed in the OWASP perspectives as well. Why? As you can see that the injections which were considered as a most critical thing in 20s, late 20s, we moved that to A3. Why is that so? We saw that broken authentication was on A2, but that's moved to A1 because nowadays everything can be patched, can be secure with the help of frameworks, with the help of your plugins, your scripts, and all the other things. So what are we still missing, or what is still left, is the thing that we are going to talk about in today's talk. Okay, so this is just a brief list of the changes that were in the 2017 and 2021. So now if you move further, why there is a need for a change, right? in every industry, in every particular industry, we change things and we try to modify, manipulate the things like we want them to work for us, right? So we continuously changing our models, we are continuously changing our methodologies and what we can say security parameters as well, along with the hardware security parameters and the software security parameters. So the static and dynamic scanners, they are very good. I'll talk about two of them. One for the IBM AppScan source code for analysis that I have used personally, and one for the NetSpark I would like to talk about. So these are dynamic and static analysis tools, but still there's one vulnerability which is cannot be detected by both of them. So we will talk about in the next slide about that. So the dynamic and static scanners fail from the perspective that I'm talking about, and we have faced this issue a lot of time. So how the vulnerabilities are protected from the user end or the client end, we will talk about that. Just for the sake of the example, if you talk about the Sql injection, in today's world, we can secure the Sql injection with a lot of methodologies and a lot of plugins, or you can say scripts that are provided by the vendor itself. So if you talk about the SQL injection, we can put the input validation checks in the web application that are provided by the MVC framework system, or you are developing in on a native application. So you can just plug in some components and you can verify the input validation from the client side, not from the server end. So you can secure it from the front end as well. Parameterized queries, stored procedures, correct escaping. These are all the techniques that are already plugged in, bundled. If you are a developer, you can just download those and you can plug it into your application with some changes, and you can secure your SQL queries in your application. So that's how we are securing it. Nowadays, if you talk about the XSS, the uh, the excesses vulnerabilities that are prevented by the browser itself. So what we can do, we try to inject something in the browser and browser itself stop the excesses attack. Or if you talk about the server end, the server will stop the attack by itself. So now the browsers are modified, the operating system, the server side scripts, everything is that much perfectly in line that they can protect the web application from the common vulnerabilities that exist and listed in the OWASP as well. So there are a few things left in the market and the world that can be protected in coming years, but they are still vulnerable, and that only caused by the developers. Yes, you heard me right. So every time I do the penetration testing for a client or someone, so I personally thank the developers of that application, because they leave some tracks, they leave some bugs in that application. That's why that make my job easier. But if the application is perfectly secured, that's hard for me, right? So I thank every developer that programs the application and they leave the bug inside so we can do our job perfectly. So other vulnerabilities can be saved as well. So now we are talking about what we are going to talk about: business logic flaws, right? So business logic flaws, we will give a brief what can happen, how they happen, what's the worst thing that we can expect from the business logic flaw. How that happen, we'll be explaining in the next slide with the pictorial form. So everyone will be understanding that what is a business logic flaw. So what are the business logic flaw? General assumptions. The business logic flaws means I'm breaking your application logic. Simple as that. You have programmed the application to work 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'm skipping the step 2. I'm directly jumping to 1, 3, 4. And if the application is working on that, and if the application is giving me the data or responding on my query or responding on my request, if we do that, so that's a business logic flaw in the application, right? So what happens? I can gain all the data in your application. We can do the IDOR, indirect object reference as well, and we can fetch the data which is not meant for me or my privileges that I can access the data. How do you do the business logic flaws arises? Negligence, as I told you earlier. The developers, when developing the application, they check everything from the SQL to the XSS to the CSRF tokens and all the other things. They implement the SSRF tokens at the server end as well. But they lack on checking the logics of their application, either to give the permission properly to the certain view or a controller. And if you talk about the .NET, so if a developer is programming, they have multiple controllers, right? And if they leave one controller unattended or without the session or something like that, privileges has not been checked on the specific controller, and it provides a view for the report or the logs or summary, something of that kind. So we can access that perfectly from the front end without the privileges. So the negligence of the developers, source code review people are always looking for that, but the scanner, the static and dynamic scanner cannot scan that for you. They can bring up Sql injection and all the other vulnerabilities, but they won't be detecting the business logic flaw until and unless you are programming it in a way to automate the automation, the process scanning process. I'll give you a brief about that, how you can automate that scanning of the business logic in the for previous slides. So, what is the impact of the business logic flaws? Disasters. You can expect anything. All the data can be stolen from you, from the web application, or I can access that. For example, I'm the report guy, and someone is the log guy, so he can see the logs of the application. I can see all the reports. If he certainly can see my reports, so that's a data leakage that can prevent by the source code review or the manual penetration testing. Because every time I heard, working as a vendor for around 8 years now, I've seen that most of the people just run the scanner and they say this is a report from a reputable scanner and we are going to fix that. But that's not the case in the web application nowadays, because everything is so modified, so engineered that you cannot find the critical vulnerabilities inside the web application just by running the scanner. So what we have to do, we have to go for the manual scanning, manual testing, checking your mind and breaking the logic. So we will be talking about that in the forward slides, common vulnerabilities in business logic flaw, what we are expecting, and how those vulnerabilities arise. Because we as a developer or a penetration tester or business user or a web user, we trust client side people. We think that if I have asked that you have to provide the username and the password, so they will be providing the username and password only. But that's not the case, because if we see that if I can provide the username along with the special characters and all the other things, so that won't be breaking the logic of the application. But if they are meant to be protected from the special characters and I'm passing the special character in that, and if that passes through the server, so that's a business logic flaw. So what we can do multiple things. We can check the source code as well. We can check the common things as well in that. So okay, yeah. Second thing, unconventional inputs. The same thing goes if I'm not expecting a single code in the input, and if the single code is there. So what I have to do, I have to see what can I do with that specific thing. But if I've left that unintended, so that will create a disaster for it. And there's one more thing: a user won't always follow the intended sequence that you have created. Web page, for example, facebook.com, login, dashboard, home, messages, and profile, something like that. So if I'm just directly going to the login page and then moving to the forward messenger page without providing the credentials, so that can also break the logic of the application. I will describe and I will explain that in a bit, that what I have faced, and I have a practical example for that as well. So this is the practical demonstration of the specific pictorial form of the business logic flaw, taken from the Portugal website, the developer of the burp suite, and all the other things. So what happens when there's a login and the password thing? So once we are attempting one side, one time the username and password incorrect, the second time username and password incorrect, the third time it passes the applications, because there is no check available on the web application that you have to check it multiple times. But it's the logic says that the password is wrong for the 2 or 3 times. After that, there is no decision making in the application. So that's the main thing that the hacker or the penetration tester is looking for, because they are trying to break the logic of your application. So that's the pictorial form, how you can see and manipulate that in your attack sequence as well. There's an example that I'll be giving, which exactly replicate this scenario. Let's move to that practical examples that we are working on. So, spawning some applications. Number one example, and by the way, these are the practical examples and practical application that are working and the used by the banks. They are reported responsibly, they are patched, their CV has been generated, and all the other things has been confined before sharing all the things. So what we are talking about over here. So I found a bug in Oracle Financial Services. So what happens in this? I've registered that as well in the CV under that. So this is the privilege escalation vulnerability there where a user A can see users B data. How that's going to be possible, I'll be explaining that as well. So on the left hand side, you can see a dashboard screen. The analyst name is analyst MY, right? There's another analyst name with the analyst SC. So that's coming on the next screen. On the left hand side, the image shows that there's a dashboard and he has more controls than the other people. On the right hand side, we have captured the request and response and all the other things. So what happens? My methodology, I'll explain that in a bit, but right now on the left hand side, there's a dashboard. Right hand side, I have captured the request that I'll be using in another session. Now, if you can see that user analyst MY was responsible for all the logs and reporting things, and he has higher privileges than the user SE. But now what happens? I log out and I log in with the analyst SC again, but there's no data. So what I did, I just copy and paste the complete request and response that I have saved from the request from analyst MY. And when I click on the forward button, on the right hand side, you can see that I can see the Oracle Financial Services application with the data inside that. And that is a very critical vulnerability in the banking industry because it uses for the fraud management and all the other things. So just think of it, if you can fetch the data from the fraud management of the banking industry or banking application. So you can insert, you can update or modify anything in the application without logging in, because on the right hand side, if you can see in the Zoom screen, so you can see that user is analyst SC. It's not now analyst MY because the user MY was responsible for that. But after logging with the user SC, we did some engineering and we manipulate the request and response so we can see the data. So this is a very critical vulnerability. Now, what we gained from this is particular example. You have to trust with the response and request of the web application. Just copy and paste every request, every response. You don't know which one is gonna work where. So you have to create a sequence and all the other things. So moving towards the second example that I have encountered with the business application again. So this is also for a bank, and this is the mobile application we are talking about a bank. Now what happens? Oh, okay. Now you can hear me, I guess. Yeah. So what happens in this application? The second application is a mobile application. What I try to do, I try to just break the login sequence of the application. Nothing fancy. I haven't loaded the burp suite in this. Trust me, and I haven't put the any kind of scanner or any automation tool. It's just a QA work I did for the bank in the application. Just give me a moment. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so I did some work and I try to log in. I try to see how the application is working in the sequence. So on the first, from the left, we start to the right and the bottom. On the left in the screen, we have the username and password, right? So what is the flow of the application? I was using the username and password. Then it sends the code, OTP code on my mobile application mobile number. So I can insert that and I can bypass the application. So now what happens? We try to follow the sequence properly for the first time. Username and password, perfect. OTP on my mobile phone, perfect. So I can log in and I can see, yeah, the screen is compatible and all the other things are working perfectly fine. But the next time, what I did, I put the username and password perfectly fine, and the perfectly username and password were legit. So it redirects me to the OTP screen. So what I did, I didn't put the original legit OTP. I worked around and I just put 0000. For example, that's not a legit OTP, but I try to manage to do that. When I press enter to log in, so it says invalid passcode. The OTP is not correct. After that, when I click OK, so it redirects me to the login screen once again. You can see just below that B pen test one, and there's a password as well. So first thing, login screen. Second thing, OTP. I put the wrong OTP, OTP invalid. Okay, it redirects me to the login screen, back to the first screen. I put the username and password, and when I just click OK, login, and it's logged in me without verifying the OTP, because we were testing it, and everything is shared with the developers, so they check the logic behind the application, and it is not checking the OTP for the second time for any user. So the problem was there that they are not checking the OTP. If I bypass the application by the wrong OTP and I put the wrong OTP 1234, it says invalid password for the first time, not for the second time. When I click and I put the username and password, and I can bypass the application. So what we are learning over here, first thing, request and response we are talking about. Second thing, just give a thorough workaround of the application what you are testing. Just follow the sequence, just try to break the sequence without any tool, without anything. Just use your creative mind and manipulate the things that it's working A B C D. Okay, I'll try to do A C D. So for example, we are going to we are talking about this application. So this is how I bypass this application. The third one is very, very critical, and that's a very good example for the response and requesting the business logic that I was talking about. So this is again, there's another bank, and this is a web application for banking. So we bypass 2FA authentication as well in this, sorry, two-factor authentication in this application as well. What happens? A critical normal general banking application, we try to log in and password, and we see the balance and all the other things, right? So on the left hand screen, left hand side, the image, the first image, there is a username and password. I put the username, I put the password. There's OTP that sends on my mobile phone. I put the regular original OTP that has been generated by the server. So when I click OK, confirm, then second screen, if you can see the second image, we have a request. In this login DNN text OTP underscore text that is highlighted 413342. This is the original OTP that was sent by the server so I can log in into my application. So what I did, I copy this sequence as well from the request and the response. If you are using the burp suite, and if you haven't used the burp suite, please go give it work with the burp suite and go to the options, and if when you click on that, intercept the server response, so you will see the client side response and the server side response as well. If you are passing 2 plus 2, if the server is responding 4, so you have to capture that as well, because you don't know which one will work after you are testing. So once I put the username and password and the request has been generated, I did the copy pasting on the notepad file. This third image that you are seeing over here, it says that the everything is okay, the OTP is okay, everything is fine, and we are redirecting you to the home screen of the web application. So I captured this as well. So now I have multiple requests in multiple notepad plus plus tabs, and I just maintain the sequence what happened after next. So now what happens, I log into the application. Now, what I have to do, I have to break the sequence, and I have to see if I can bypass the 2FA as well or not. So what happens on the, again, the left hand screen, left hand side image, 1, 2, 3. So we are talking about, for the first image, if we see that I put the username and password correct, but I use the wrong OTP. So maybe I've used something 00 if that is not written over here. So maybe I've used a wrong OTP this time. So server responded me in the image 2, if you can see, provided OTP is incorrect. So this is the actual sequence that when you provide the OTP, it redirects you to the home page. And if you provide the illegit OTP, so it'll say that provided OTP is incorrect. It happens to every application if you provide the username and password wrong. So you can see that username and password incorrect. So why and how we are going to break the sequence? Remember, I have saved all the requests from the previous legit login request. Everything is on my Notepad++. So I tried to copy and paste and see how I'm going to bypass this. So bear with me. I'll just go to my previous slide. Once the server responded me that OTP provided OTPs are incorrect, I just copy the data from the image 3, which is redirecting me and not checking the session ID and all the other things. I just copy and paste the requested data from the image 3 on this screen to the screen on this screen, the image 2. So what happens? Server is saying that provided OTP is incorrect, but what I've provided instead of that, redirect me to the home and the dashboard. And if the application is working perfectly fine, it should be stopping me that you are not the same user that has provided the previous OTP. So here we are bypassing the OTP and we are reusing the OTP as well, because the server legitimately accepts this OTP that is mentioned over here, 413342. But now in this application, I just bypass the application flow of the 2FA by just providing copy and pasting the previous data in the application. And on the right hand side, if you see the image number 3, so you can see I have bypassed the application, and you can see the balance, the country, the branch name, and all the other things. So in short, we are inside the application. And one more thing I have not mentioned over here, along with the OTP, I have bypassed the password policy as well, because when you're providing the username and password, so it goes to the OTP screen. So prior to that, what I did, I used that same technique, copy and pasting all the requests and response from the server of the legit username and password. Now providing the wrong password, copy pasting the original response that has been already accepted to the server from the server. So I just paste that, and what happened? It bypassed the password policy as well. So now I'm left with the OTP. So I have the OTP bypass as well. So I just need the username of the user for the application, and I can bypass the password and OTP as well. So what we have to take it from this example, the response and request. Again, I'm telling you from the first example, the second and the third, request and response plays a vital role. Do not discard any request and response. Just copy and paste everything and see what happens after you are passing parameter 1, 2, 3, or input, or any kind of data you are providing to the server. So you have to see how the server is reacting on your request. So if the request has been bypassed properly, just save it and reuse with the other user. So I'll talk about the methodologies and all the other things in the previous coming slides as well. Methodologies. See, one thing I'm saying that you cannot automate the process and you cannot see what happened when you're providing the application flow and all the other things. But there's a security thing and there's a burp suite plugin as well. We can automate this process. If you cannot do that manually every time, so we have one thing that is known by as auth metrics, authentication metrics, provided by the burp suite. So what happens in this? So you have to do some manual work instead of complete automation, but your work will be automated. Why and how? You provide different workflows and you repeat the workflows with the different user privileges in this. Skip the step sequence, and if you use the auth metric, if you have used it, that's perfectly fine. If you haven't, just give it a try on the B web or any vulnerable application that you're using for the testing. So what happens? You provide the sequence with the different users, just like the automated script we are working. The network people know this better, that we use the automated script to automate a task inside the system as well. So it automatically go and do all the things one by one, click, escape, and anything. So in the auth metrics, you can automate your system, you can automate your process and just flow with the sequence and see where you are lacking. Another thing, repeat the workflow with a different user that I've already mentioned you. If you are a penetration tester or if you are starting in the penetration testing field, Every time you scan the application, just ask the client for 2 or 3 privileges of different users. So different privileges users, you can just cross verify them if they are working all together in crossing as well. If the user is admin, what I do, my methodology, I take one credential for the admin, one for the manager, and one for the least privileged user that has no screen or just one screen. So what happens, I try to manipulate the request and the response from the admin to that least user, and if that is bypassed, so the vulnerability is there and the system has been bypassed. Why I'm focusing on this and why I'm emphasizing nowadays that the business logic flaw is very critical in the bug bounty field. That as you know, that I have worked for the bug bounty hunting as well, and there's a bug in the Instagram. Some researcher and bug bounty hunter, he bypassed the OTP of Instagram by proxy chaining and all the other things. So somehow he bypassed that. Instagram paid him 20 grand, 20,000 US dollars for that single vulnerability. So the vulnerability is real. The highest bounties paid in the bug bounty hunting programs as the business logic flaws nowadays, because most of the critical vulnerabilities are already patched. I already told you about that. So these are a few methodologies that you have to work on your web application. One or two more things that I'll explain you, that how you gonna secure or how you gonna ask your application about that. What to look for? So you have to look for multiple things in the application and in the business documentation and the business owners. You have to talk if you are a project owner, product owner, or a consultant as well. Now, what you have to look into a source code. If you have a complete flow of the application, the understanding of the application, the rules and the process, so that's completely fine. And if you don't have the complete understanding of the application, please call the developer or the project owner to gain the complete understanding how this process is going to work. Simple technique, one more thing, divide and conquer. Just divide and model your web application program one by one. The login sequence, the all the other things that we are talking about. If you're talking about the reporting, so just break that down, check the flow, and check if you're a QA person, that's a good thing for you. You can check it in the QA process. But if you're a security programmer, penetration tester, or source code reviewer, so you can go to the source code of every chunk of that program module, and you can test few of the things, input validation, source code review, and you have to see what from what where, and I'll be explaining that in the next slide as well. So what you have to do, just take the screenshot of the screen, that is slide, that will help you a lot. So you have to identify where the controls are carried out right and where they are not. So you have to make it perfectly fun for the user to the front end and the back end. The parameters, you have to check the parameters if they are sanitized, if there's the parameter escaping is there or not. So what you have to ask, this is the main question while developing, while testing, while concerning, while governing a product on an application. You need the data. If you are the user, you need the data right. The data will travel from where to where, from where. Where are you getting the data, where you will store the data, and how you're going to store the data. Who do you need the data from whom you need the data is going where, and how often you require that data. So these are the few queries that you can enable in your daily task. If someone is asking you for the data, you have to inquire about the data, right? That how you're going to use the data and how often you are going to use the data. So I can provide the access to that specific information to the certain time. We use the PAM solution for that as well, and all the other things in the networking side. So for the web application, you have to just focus on these queries. So my final words for this presentation: never underestimate any request and response from the server. Just copy and paste everything, create the sequence and all the other things, and just try to manipulate the request and response one by one. Check the sequence, try to break the sequence, use the previously saved sequence, and that's how you're gonna secure your application against the business logic flaws. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. It's lovely to be on remote. I'll try to be on site for the next time if there is a next time. So thank you very much, everyone. That's it from my side. If there's any query, moderator, so we can take up the queries, and yeah.